In today's video, I'm gonna go over all the differences between the Nautilus 5712 and the 3712. Just looks like a Nautilus 5712 to those who know, but if you look closely, it's actually what I think is the most secretive Nautilus out of all of them. That is the 3712. It's like Patek's most forgotten Nautilus, the one that you never see on social media posts. It's the one that you never hear anybody say it's their grail piece. In the past, I've kind of expressed that I wasn't exactly 100% too crazy about this 5712 in general. I kind of lean more towards the 5980s. I know, I get it. That's the big boy, whatever. But it wasn't until I actually wore one for about a week that I started to lean more into thinking that I enjoy the 5712 better than the 5711. Yes, 5711 is a true classic, always will be and always has been, but I feel like it's a little bit too basic for me, and I don't know, it's on the thin side. But the 5712 and 3712 are also thin as well. Since the dial is that much more busy and some people at home don't like the fact that it's not symmetrical, I kind of like it. It's growing on me and it's something that I would definitely enjoy in the future. But now let's talk a little bit about the difference between this one and the 5712, which I brought one as well so we can look at. The number one thing right off the bat is that it's 1 millimeter smaller. In reality, I think that if you're wearing it and someone sees it, you can almost barely tell. It's like that subtle of a difference. So yes, it's 1 millimeter smaller. Another thing that I noticed immediately was the size of the crown. The crown on the 3712 is a lot smaller, whereas the 5712 has more of a beefier, bigger crown. Nowhere near sub crown, but bigger. Before I continue, I also want to mention that it's pretty interesting to know that no one really knows exactly how many of the 3712s were actually made. It had a very short production time, something about 9 months. Some guys will say there was 1,000 made. I believe less. I don't think Patek makes that many of these watches in a year of a specific model, but no one really knows. So that's one of the things that makes this watch such a coveted model, is the fact of the short production time. Back to the differences. Besides the crown, which for me kind of stands out, on the opposite side of the case, the iconic bump on the side of the Nautiluses on the 3712 is flat, whereas the 5712 has a light curve to it. It's almost like looking at a Coke bottle. You know the shape of it from far away. But if you look at this one really close, you say, something looks kind of odd on it. And when you realize that flatness and that small crown, it's kind of almost a dead giveaway. Another difference is that when you go to the back of the case back, the 5712 has a screw-on rear case back, whereas the 3712 is permanent, making it a two-piece case, which is pretty much the case body and the bezel, whereas the 5712 is 3 pieces. On the exterior sides, I would say pretty much that's the only difference when it comes to the exterior, because the bracelet to me looks and fits pretty much the same. I mean, I haven't actually tried one on the other watch, and I don't think anybody has, but I haven't heard much chatter about it. So let's just go ahead and just assume that it's the same. When you start going to the dial of the watch is when you really start noticing the differences. One of the first things they changed was the color of the dial. Where the 3712 appears to be a bit more darker, the 5712 seems to be a bit more bluer. And honestly, I think it has to be whether you're colorblind or not, because I kind of see it the other way around. And yes, I looked at it without my glasses. From there, you go over to the power reserve. Now, on the power reserve, when it starts getting towards the end of its life on the gauge, you're gonna see 4 dots, 4 red dots. The 5712 has 4 red dots, whereas the 3712 has 3. So here start the subtle changes that make a big difference. From there, we're gonna move on to the number markers around the dial. A major one is that the 3712 has a marker at the 7 o'clock, where the 5712 does not. Some of the subtle differences there. If you look at the 6 o'clock marker as well, it's a little bit different in shape than the 5712. These are little, small, subtle things. But if you want to look at another major thing, is on the calendar wheel. The calendar wheel from 9 to 21 on the 5712 is upright. In other words, half of them are this way, and then the bottom ones are upright. Where on the 3712, they went all the way around upside down. Kind of like the old Daytonas, you know, how people say the inverted 6 and all that. Same thing. So yes, there are a few more differences that I'm not gonna go over, but one of the last things I'm gonna say is that the moon with the stars on the moon face on the 3712 are actually reflective, almost like a chrome reflective, which I kind of like. Whereas the 5712 is more of a white painted finish. One of the things that I like the most out of the 3712 that I wish they would have brought over to the new one is that. So besides all these physical differences and stuff like that, one of the biggest differences is the price. I mean, could you imagine if they made, and maybe they do, if anybody knows, let me know, a 3712 with a Tiffany dial? I mean, I don't even want to know what the price for that would be. But one of the big differences are the prices. This is a watch that's going to cost you nowadays pretty much $200,000. I'm assuming in the area of 200s. I think it's a safe number if you want to pick one up full set. This is an important watch. It's a piece of history in the Nautilus. And honestly, some people might say they don't like it, it's too small. I kind of like it. Doesn't bother me one bit. I think I can put this watch on, and in reality, unless you really know, it doesn't feel any different. I wonder if there's anybody that was lucky enough to buy one of these thinking it was a 5712 and actually hit a home run before the hype. I'm sure there's probably one. What surprises me so much with this watch in today's market is that with so much hype surrounding these models, how come you don't hear much about it? It's almost like the forgotten Nautilus. You don't hear a lot about it. I think the last time that I saw one of these watches was about 7 years ago. I haven't seen or heard anything about this watch at all, at least not in my circles. So it's safe to say that if you have a Patek Philippe Nautilus 3712 in your collection, you're looking to see some major gains in the upcoming years. So feel free to comment below what your thoughts are on the 3712 versus the 5712. And if you like this video, like and share it with someone else. Also, subscribe to my new YouTube channel.